I gotta capture our ranting. Yeah. So there's two different things that are happening, and I can't tell if there's a delay in our audio, so I'll fix it if there is a delay. I'll have to fix it in post at this point. There is your roadmap, and then you break your roadmap into stories, and the team breaks into tasks, whatnot, and then you take those stories and you chunk those stories up to break them into releases. And then when you actually go to push a release out, it becomes a deployment. So you have release planning saying, I want all these stories to go together in this deployment at this point. And then you have the actual deployment. So the release planning and the deployment planning are two completely separate concepts. Okay. The only reason I highlight that is because I'm going to talk about all these like they're the same thing. I'm going to get it's going to get all mixed together right here in a second. So my personal feeling is the Scrum Master has, I think we can argue about the Scrum Master's role in release planning, okay, and the Scrum Master's role in deployments. So those are two pieces of the same thing. So the Scrum Master's role in release planning versus the Scrum Master's role in deployments, I'm going to take the side. Scrum Master has no part in any of those things. I'm going to throw that out. That's my incendiary post to LinkedIn in order to get people clicking and writing angry tweets at me in order to get engagement. That would be what I would say is Scrum Master has no role in this. Your release planning is a function of product ownership saying, I want this and this and this and then go. And then the actual deployment is all the code that's finished actually going out to production. I don't think the Scrum Master has a role in that either. So on one hand, the planning of the releases that go to production, I don't think the Scrum Master plays any part in. And then the actual sending the things to production, I don't think the Scrum Master has a role in that either.
Yeah, so you've dropped that grenade and hopefully you've removed the pin as well, right? I'm going to separate out those two for a second, right? Yeah. So release planning is a function of the business, essentially, right, represented through the product owner, etc. The role a Scrum Master plays there is one of a catalyst, if any. So if you have competent product people, the Scrum Master doesn't even have to be anywhere near the scene. Mm-hmm. That's seldom the case. Yeah. So in that scenario where it's seldom the case, a Scrum Master can facilitate, meaning they can be the coach who says, this is the event, right? Invite the right people, etc. But that's the extent of their involvement. They're not going to have a say in anything on a board because that's the domain of the product owner. Yeah. Where things go on the board, up and down versus across, etc., on the product planning piece, right? Release planning piece. Yeah. Chunking out MVP, etc. Mm-hmm. Where Scrum Master comes into the picture is just instilling that discipline that, everything above a line is MVP, everything below a line is post or whatever, but they're not going to have a say in which item goes where, right? So it's really more of a ceremonial role. That's about it. Going to the other side of it, the actual deployment.
Oh, let's not jump there yet, because that's not what I've seen in most of the projects I've been on. What I've seen in most of the projects I've been on is the product owner just says, we need all this. They'll just come out, we need all this. It needs to be in the release. And the Scrum Master has to kind of funnel all that into saying, well, everything you're asking for needs to come to a refinement. It needs to get broken down. It needs to get put some estimates to it or whatever. And everything you're asking for looks like it's too big to make that date. And there's a negotiation back and forth. And I would like to say the Scrum Master is just responsible for facilitating the product owner's journey through release planning, release mapping, release planning, whatever you want to call it. But in actuality, what they become is, let me take all your stories and we'll bring them in and we'll bring them to the team and we'll put points to them, and then we'll kind of go back and negotiate your MVP based on this is what we can do by this date. Because usually that kind of stuff happens because there's a date that's set in stone for whatever reason, some kind of date the business is trying to hit, and then it becomes a discussion of what can we do by that date, and that becomes your release planning.
Yeah, so I agree with you. That's what I've seen as well.
It's still a function of product ownership, though. The Scrum Master is just kind of, I don't even know what they're injecting reality into. I don't know a good way to phrase it,
Yeah, I think you're right on all of those fronts. I think what they can do, though, is to facilitate perhaps a road mapping event, right, where the right people are in the room. Right. And often this event is downplayed, but it takes time to do this, right? It's usually a couple of days if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
So the Scrum Master's role here is to time box various portions of the event, making sure that the right people are in the room, making sure that they're following the structure, if you will, right? Getting the dev teams or the tech leads to do high level, et cetera, everything that's involved in road mapping.
Yeah.
But if they do it during the event while the product owner is in the room or stakeholders are in the room, that negotiation you mentioned can happen within that event.
Right.
So when you leave the event after the second day, a roadmap that is mutually agreed upon is on the wall. Now the Scrum Master can take that and say, okay, now we're going to work on this, and put that in your ALM tool or whatever.
Yeah.
At that point, they're just really being a secretary.
Yeah. The other thing I read one time, which was, I can't remember where I read it, but I read something about what's a career killing mistake you can make as a product manager / product owner. And a lot of the responses on the thread were commit to dates without ever engaging the team or getting real estimates. Because you commit to dates, and they're just picked out of the air. They're just made up. You have no idea, and then you basically the team has to come save you because you committed to dates without asking them.
Right.
Or you have to dial so much back on functionality that you look like you're,
under delivering.
Yeah, under delivering.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very true. Yeah. So while there is a role, perhaps, right, in organizations where you don't have the maturity of not only the product owner, but also the entire team to come together and say, let's go through a road mapping exercise. I've not seen that very often. So the Scrum Master as a coach can come and guide that process. But that's about the extent of their involvement. With modern tools, they don't even have to really do a lot of secretarial work, right? But if you use the tool set correctly. What I've done in the past before we had those tools available is once everybody agrees on what the roadmap looks like, we take a break, go get some food, come back, and then look at that and once more just go over it visually and say, right, does this feel right? If it feels right, it's good for now. We can always pivot later.
Yeah.
But for now, it looks right. And then I would ask my team to enter those things in the ALM tool because you've got all the team members there. So if everybody takes a few of these things and enters them, in a few minutes, it's all done and over with, right?
Yeah.
It's already in your ALM tool.
Yeah, that's a you just hit on a big point where teams really fail, which is or it's not even, well, I guess the team failed too, but they'll engage the Scrum Master and the product owner or several Scrum Masters, and so this is my experience. They'll bring just the Scrum Masters and the product owners in the room, and the organization will kind of think that the Scrum Master is sort of like a project manager in that instance, and they'll say, well, what dates it's going to work? You need the team in the room.
Absolutely.
And you need to do a deeper planning than just high level objectives. The team's got to, at least consider what's involved in implementing the items in order for you to even think about getting a high, even T-shirt sizes. Right. I mean, I guess maybe if you've been a Scrum Master and product owner for the teams for a long time, the team's been together a long time, you might have a good feeling T-shirt size wise. You might have a good feeling of how large a feature is when you're bringing it in. So maybe you would be close to what the team would say, but still, I can't think of a lot of reasons why not to engage your team at that point.
No, you're spot on.
The risk versus reward of not engaging your team is just, I can't understand why.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, especially if you have, you're talking about team, right? What happens if you have multiple teams or you're on a scale structure? It's even more critical.
Yeah, because then you become a dependency for your other teams, and if you miss, you really miss because you're going to derail the whole choo-choo train.
Exactly, right? Absolutely. No, that's very true. Yeah, so the Scrum Master perhaps has a role, but it's not a major role in the release planning.
It's a role like the facilitation and making sure that things are happening, make sure the gears are oiled and are moving. That's the same role that the Scrum Master has in many, many other events. It's not any more special than anything else. Release planning is just taking the things that you have already refined and putting them to a timeline. Now let's step over to the other side of the house, which is the actual deployment. Again, I will say, which I say to clients, I say to people in the business, I say to other people, I'll tell developers, I'll tell my team members all the time. I tell them, I don't think the Scrum Master has any role in the actual active deployment. When a developer is rolling out code from one environment to the next or whatever, what is the Scrum Master going to do? The developer is going to say, all right, I'm beginning the process of rolling out code. Maybe a chat room or a Slack message or an email or whatever, you know what I mean? Hey, I'm beginning the deployment process. Hey, I'm finishing the deployment process. The deployment process went successfully or whatever. If you have a CI/CD in place or some kind of DevOps process or whatever, even that is redundant, because the CI/CD should tell you automatically, you know, this deployment happened. You'll have a dashboard to look at to see what deployment is most current. What's, you know, oh, version 145 is in production. It went into production at, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning on July 22nd or whatever. You can see it on the dashboard. You don't need someone to tell you an email, you know.
So you're right. However, there's this thing about deployments to, you know, the business want to know. They're anxious because I'm talking about production deployment perhaps, or maybe even stage. You know, there's an impact to the business of some kind. They're already on edge, right?
Yeah, it very well could be staged if they're waiting on, for example, if they're waiting on their UAT to be rolled out or whatever. They don't know when their features are going to be available. It could be staged, yeah.
It could be staged. So regardless, so they are on edge. They don't have visibility to your CI/CD dashboards, right? So they need to be told at some point, yes, we're going to deploy ahead of the deployment, and then post deployment, they need to be told it's ready for you to go get it, right? It's there. That's the Scrum Master's role right there.
No, I will disagree. That sounds like an issue with your CI/CD. The whole reason of having automated deployment through CI/CD pipelines is so that you can take care of all this nonsense automatically or auto-magically.
Who's going to let your leadership know? I'm not talking about people that are going to test the software later. I'm talking about people at a higher level. They need to be told we're successfully live now on version blah blah blah, because they're interested.
They can be part of an email group, or auto distribution group, or whatever. And when the deployment is successful in that environment, it can fire an email to the distribution group that says version 145 is now available in stage, and here are the stories that are included in the 145 build, 145 release that went through the pipeline. That all that stuff should be automated.
It's mechanically possible to automate all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Now.
When it fails,
if it fails, I don't need to send an email out,
right.
And then the leadership will know. Oh, I didn't get my email. Nothing happened. The emails. I had a manager one time. Wow, we turned this segue into a whole topic right now. I had a manager one time who he did not care about dashboards. He's like, I live and work out of my email. I want everything sent to my email. I want a copy of the dashboard sent to my email as an image. I am not even kidding you. That's the micromanaging level that he wanted. He wanted to wake up in the morning at whenever he woke, 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember when he woke up. He got to work later than I did, so he didn't wake up at 6:30 in the morning. I woke up at 6:30. I got to work 100% of the time before he got there. I remember what we did for him was I was an automation engineer at the time, and I had another QA automation engineer. I was like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pull up at 6:30 in the morning. We're going to pull up the dashboard. We're going to call I don't remember what we used for automation. We used Selenium, and I don't remember what, Java, Python. I don't remember what we used. But whatever we used, we loaded it on our automation environment, and we opened the web browser at a certain time in the morning. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. We opened the dashboard for that day. We took a screen print of the dashboard for that day. We loaded it in an email, and we sent it to the executive because he was too lazy to check the dashboard. The real-time dashboard we built shows you exactly what happened. Yeah. But he would not check the dashboard. He's like, no, I need it proactively sent to my email.
Well, some of that is also this need for CYA. So he can go. Yeah, he can tell people above him, this is what happened, and Brian sent me this, so it's that a lot of times as well.
I know.
But no, to your point, I think you can automate all of the above. You can definitely do that, but you still have some of that old guard, that basically want to be told things. Definitively, let me know when it's successful. Let me know when it fails, and what are you doing about it? Right? Because we got all these people lined up, ready to test or whatever it is. You've got all these users that are waiting for compliance deadlines, whatever the real burning need is. Yeah. they need to be pacified with some sort of an explanation, which is hard to automate. The part about the actual facts, it failed because of blah, or it succeeded, that part is non-negotiable, it's non-changeable, it's discrete, it's defined. The padding around it, how you sell the story for failures or even successes, right? How you actually tell the story, that is a person writing it.
Yeah.
It's not heavy lifting, but often it falls upon the Scrum Master because they are like the general dog's body, right? So, they can look at the dashboard and see what happened.
Yeah.
If it failed, now they've got to talk to somebody because they're typically not technical enough to figure out why it failed.
Yeah.
And so they'll talk to whoever it is in the team and say, what are we doing about this? And then they at this point, they're nothing more than a secretary.
Yeah.
So they're now relaying up to keep the wolves at bay. They're saying, it failed, the team's on it. That's all the leadership want to hear is somebody's doing something. They haven't gone to sleep, right?
Yeah.
So I think there might be a minor role there, but yeah, it's not a significant role.
I don't know if I agree.
It's not something a Scrum Master would put on their resume.
I don't know if I agree. I don't think the Scrum Master has any role in any way, shape, or form. If a deployment fails, it's the Scrum Master is not accountable for any of the work. The product owner is accountable for the work. So if a deployment to an environment fails, the business is going to come for the head of the product owner. They're not going to come for the head of any individual developer or the Scrum Master. I think the product owner, it's on the product owner to be in front of that, going to the rest of the business to say, feature A and B and C are not ready on stage because the deployment last night failed. And maybe the product owner is the only one that's included in the email distribution group to let them know that the deployment failed. And maybe it's on them to get in front of those users before those users say, a real situation for this would be the users are like, oh, we expected Monday morning at 9 a.m. to come into work, and we all were going to dedicate the first, every morning for the next week. For the first 4 hours that we're here is going to be testing against whatever, and we needed to know that the stuff wasn't ready to be tested or whatever, whatever it is. That's a common situation. Oh, the software wasn't ready, and you guys didn't let us know the software wasn't ready, so we were testing on whatever that obviously wasn't ready for us. Somebody should have let us know, right? I don't think the Scrum Master I'm gonna get real pedantic about this. That I could come online with the Scrum Master should help if they see that. And they see the product owner hasn't responded yet, and they get to work first or whatever. Let's pretend we all work in an office, right? We all get to work at between 8 and 9 a.m., right? Scrum Master sees that there's people sitting in chairs ready to go, and the product owner hasn't shown up yet. The Scrum Master could send out a message or whatever to all those guys that says, hey, the release failed last night. We're looking into it first thing in the morning. We're not doing anything except make sure that we get on this deployment thing, and they could certainly head off any kind of bad situation like that. Certainly they could help out, but the responsibility of that stuff's on the product owner. I don't see that being on the Scrum Master at all. So
I agree with you that the responsibility is on the product owner. In real life, what I've seen though is when that happens, the product owner typically asks the Scrum Master, what's happening?
Yeah, only because the Scrum Master is the conduit to the development team.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they should be free enough to just ask the development team, hey, what happened to my pipeline? What's going on? Or let's not we're letting the product owners off the hook because they're from the business. Stereotypically from the business, I don't know anything about pipeline. Listen, I can do the same thing as a Scrum Master. I was I don't know anything about release pipelines. Oh, poor me. But I know exactly how a release pipeline works. I can go into the pipeline, go look at the log myself, and see the reason for the failure.
Sure, you could. Product owner could do that.
Product owner could do that exact same thing too.
But most people in the business side of things that are product owner, they don't do that. They don't do that.
No, nor would I strap them down with that responsibility. Go figure it out yourself.
They would ask the Scrum Master what happened, and it's not that they want to know the details about mechanically, really technically what happened. What they want to know is what happened. Is the team on it? When do you think we might hear from them? Right? To set that expectation again upstream. To say we're working on it. It might be later today, or it might be tomorrow, or it might be next week, or whatever. So that's about it. So again, it's not a big ask on the Scrum Master.
It's not. I agree, it's not. But I'm trying to stay out of any situation that puts a Scrum Master into the communication relay exercise of product owner, Scrum Master, what's wrong? What happened to the build? Scrum Master, lead developer, what happened to the build? Oh, he told me this. He told me, like, that's waste, in my opinion.
It absolutely is waste.
It would be better to just get the lead developer on. Hey, tell us what happened. Oh, well, we had this database backup that timed out and blah, blah, blah. We're going to run it again today manually. If it still times out, then, you know, the Scrum Master shouldn't be in the middle. My experience in large organizations and my experience in small organizations with this specific topic have been wildly different, because in large organizations, they do exactly what we're talking about now, which is you put the Scrum Master directly in the middle of the communication, and then all communication goes to the Scrum Master, and the development team talks to the Scrum Master, and then the business/product side talks to the Scrum Master, and then the Scrum Master is the bottleneck of communication between when the two should just all get on a call together and just talk about what happened. But if a release fails, larger organizations, your release is probably not a small one-team release. Your release is probably part of a larger program, and then you have 4 or 5, 6 teams worth of code that fail to roll into production. So, you know, you could be talking about multiple product owners, multiple stakeholders.
Sure.
Yeah, a very, very large sort of system that's being stalled. So the call, when you say, oh, just put a call together, a couple people, that call could be 50 people. You can't just put a call together with 50 people.
Right.
So in that instance, I completely understand why you would want a Scrum Master kind of, because they're doing their role in shielding the team from having to get on a call with 50 people and try to explain why a call failed, and you have some director who's, how can we make sure this never happens again?
Exactly.
Well, you can never make sure it never happens again. That's
right.
how.
That role is important, though. Shielding the team from the noise when the team should be getting on with trying to solve the problem, right? We've all been there. You know, explaining to somebody and then explaining to somebody else and explaining to somebody else, instead of leave me alone for an hour, I'll fix it. You know, so in that regard, perhaps the Scrum Master has a role to shield the team. I'm with you in terms of the theory, right? Scrum Master should not have a role. But in practice, I've always seen the Scrum Master be the ping pong ball in the middle, getting knocked around. It's sad but true.
Yeah, I have as well. But even with everything I just said, I agree. You have the Scrum Master in the middle, they're shielding your team. Even though I completely understand the reason for it, I still don't agree with it. I think there's, in that organization that I was just describing, where there's 6 teams contributing to the program, you have some kind of technical lead who doesn't sit on the teams. They sit at a higher level. They're a lead developer or a development manager, a director of development, or something like that. And they should know what's going on. And it should be them on the call, not a Scrum Master not a single team Scrum Master. Although you could pick apart my argument to say, well, you're gonna have a scaled Scrum Master in that kind of environment. Most likely, you're not gonna have one Scrum Master with 6 teams who's talking about some one problem. Again, I still don't agree that a Scrum Master is the appropriate person to be in there. The appropriate person to be in the middle of all that is some kind of lead developer or a technical architect developer, something like that, who can say, we have this problem with the pipeline, we are working on it, and they can be on the call with 50 people, you know, I
agree with that.
Leading that. Now, we can agree on the fact that, well, the Scrum Master has to alert, and again, it comes back to the Scrum Master. He can help facilitate that. They can help facilitate that. Well, I'll get the call together so no one developer gets slammed over, but the Scrum Master is not, like, when they start getting pressed by the business, and they start pressed by the business, like the product owners, or they start getting pressed by a CTO or something like that. In that instance, the Scrum Master is not going to have. They're not going to have the technical details. They're not going to know this process, this database process timed out or whatever. And if you get a CTO or somebody on the call and say, "Well, I want to know what failed." What in our process failed? I don't know. You know, most of the time the Scrum Master will not be able to give them those details.
For sure. Yeah, they're just a conduit at that point. The only answer they can give is the same one that most project managers give. I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, I do agree with you. It should be a technical lead. Often it's an RTE or of some kind who's on top of all that, right? Not a Scrum Master of a given team necessarily. I'd say even a Scrum Master or Scrum Master. They may not know. It really, should be a technical lead who relays the message about success or failure. Sometimes it's an RTE rather than a Scrum Master of a team, or even a Scrum Master or anything like that, right? Because these people aren't technical in nature. And to your point, a director level CIO type of person might want the actual details, real technical details about what happened. We ran out of a compute resource of some kind, right? There was IO contention on the database drives or whatever.
So they should be getting what they're development leads of each team, or their technical architects that are over all the teams, and they should be drilling into those technical details with a smaller audience of just those people.
Right.
They shouldn't be bringing that up. They shouldn't be drilling for those answers on, at that high level. Basically, they shouldn't be asking for technical answers from non-technical resources. Meaning, again, back to my point, they shouldn't be asking a Scrum Master, "Hey, why did this build fail?" And if I will be with you, I'm with you to say the Scrum Master can help facilitate the communication of the release failed. Let me get these resources rescheduled for whatever. Let me communicate. Let me get the word out. That kind of stuff. I'm not with you on. This sounds like such a Brian way of saying. No, we'll disagree with you on this. My point of contention is, I don't think the Scrum Master. I don't really know. I really don't even think the Scrum Master should be involved in that kind of stuff. Maybe facilitating to make sure it gets set up. But even that, if you have a I keep saying build. If you have a release failure, your technical leads should be all over it, or at least the development leads on your team. If you have a smaller organization, they should be all over it. So somebody else who's not the Scrum Master should be all over it already.
So they're yeah, absolutely. They're all over it in terms of debugging, fixing the actual issue, right? Yeah. But the side of things where the Scrum Master is often called upon is the communications of it. Right. The business wants to know what happened. If the build is successful, great. That message needs to go out. Who sends that?
Yeah.
Right. If the build is not successful, that message needs to be carefully crafted and positioned in front of the business, right? Because they're going to be looking for an answer. Why? Mm-hmm. And followed by when, right? When can we get an answer about the success message? We're looking for that. That's what we want. These tech leads that you talked about aren't going to go there.
I understand from the perspective of the business is going to want to know why.
Right.
The situation that I have found myself in more often than not is the business wants a head. You know what I mean?
Yes.
They want a head to roll because the deployment failed. The technical people in that conversation need to be the adults in the room to say, stop. None of y'all should be upset about a release failing. We, the developers, should be more upset about the release failing. We need to get to the real reason why the release failed so we can fix. I should stop for a second, because I get super aggravated in this discussion because it's real close to my heart, because everywhere I've ever worked has had CI/CD pipelines or transitioned to CI/CD pipelines, so everything's automatic. Pajama parties in the middle of the night, or they're not in vogue anymore, right? Wow, too many segues. Killed my train.
Segue right back to where we were.
Segue right back to where I was, yeah. The reason I say is the developers are the ones that are tasked with figuring out the failure and then making sure that failure never occurs again. So they're really the only ones that actually have a responsibility, and everybody else is just communicated with to say, hey, the release failed. We're working on the failure reason, and we're going to make it successful. Give us some time. Other than how much time do you need, do you really need to communicate more than that?
No, but most developers I know, even the tech leads, they don't pony up that information. They don't say,
right.
They don't say, hey, the build failed. We're looking into it. They feel like it's a challenge. It's a failure for them. So what they'd rather be doing is hands on keyboard, fix the problem.
Right.
Now you've got all this noise coming at you, right? Not you, but at the team.
Yeah.
So that's where the Scrum Master could say, okay, well, let them continue. I'm gonna just tell them, right? Nothing technical, but I'm just gonna tell them it failed. Don't know why. The team's looking at it. In the next hour, I'll send out another little bulletin, just a couple of lines, or maybe just do that in a chat room or something.
Yeah.
But insulate them from the noise so that they can get on with it. Because I've not found many tech leads to say, let me get in front of the business and explain what happened, right?
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
Yeah. When I was a product owner at one company, I'm trying to remember, we had this at a couple of companies. I asked the development leads we had Slack, and we had our CI/CD notifications integrated with Slack. Mm-hmm. And what would happen is when a release would go out, it would send a message to the release room. I don't remember what the room was called, product release or something like that. And it would say, release number whatever is now available in production, staging, whatever the environments were. And each of those releases, since release pipelines have stories, the system knows what work items are included in a release pipeline. So you could spit out a list of all the stories that are involved. So you would say, well, release 192 is now available in staging, which includes, and then you just, a list of stories. Now, now we pivot to the other side, which is now those stories have to have titles that are good enough where anybody who's in that channel can understand exactly what's been pushed to the environment. And that is a discussion we're not going to have right now, which is how to correctly title your stories and whatever bug fixes, whatever you want to call them.
That's an interesting point you raised. So, if you have automation to the point where it spits out the stories that are part of that release, etc., there should be no reason for anybody to have to separately, externally, outside of that, create release notes.
Yeah.
But believe me when I tell you, I have seen Scrum Masters being asked to do this and struggle, because what they do is manually copy paste from Jira or whatever into a Word doc or Excel sheet. And I'm saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, if you're using pipelines within Azure DevOps, you got no excuse, because every single work item that is attached to a successful, or not successful release, every single work item that's attached to a release into whatever environment, you can get that immediately out of the API. All the releases are kept in there. And if you're using Jira, then you have to jump through a little more hoops with Jira, because you have to integrate some kind of CI/CD process with Jira, but you can do it out of Jira. I've done it out of both, and you need to learn how to utilize that stuff. Even if you're the Scrum Master, I think everybody could benefit from learning how to use the basics of an API.
Sure. But even beyond that, like a Scrum Master may not know how to use an API. You know, so I've done simple things like a query in ADO, in Azure DevOps, where you just use the hashtag and the ID, and do a query that says everything that has release 2 or whatever the tag is on it, and it spits that out. And then you can put that under a tile on a dashboard, right? I've done things like that, which help, right? But Scrum Masters are being asked to do all sorts of things, right? And so, they need to push back. They need to have that stronger personality to say, no, I'm not doing that, but I'm going to give you the answer you need, right? And you may need to self-consume that. So I need you to hit this URL, go to the dashboard, and don't expect an email in your inbox.
Yeah, and I would push back on that to say, even if this is one of those instances where the Scrum Master, it's kind of okay for the Scrum Master to put work back on the development team, and with not to belabor this topic even like more than it is right now, but if you're a Scrum Master and you are listening to this and you say, oh, Brian told me that I can hit an API endpoint and get every change request, every single work item that's attached to a release, I can get it out in the API and just spit it out. Which, trust me, you can get that, because I did that before, and you have no idea how to hit an API. You should probably engage your developers and your product owner and be like, hey, can we get just a real quick, Brian told me I can have a little script integrated with my pipeline where when it runs successfully, it can spit out this report. Your developers can write that in an hour.
Oh yeah.
Super quick.
That's an hour well invested, because you'll pay back.
Yeah, well, it's one of those instances where you can put something on the roadmap, because look, anybody else can put technical leads can put stuff on the roadmap. You put technical items on the roadmap, put environmental things on the operations things on the roadmap, product feature related things on the roadmap. Why wouldn't you put some sort of like simple automated release notes kind of reporting? Put that on your roadmap, man. Just kind of integrated with, especially something so small. It's very easy to get. It's very well documented. And if you're not going to do it yourself, a Scrum Master could do it yourself. You could download some kind of tool, Postman, whatever you want to use, learn how to hit the API. You can get the information yourself. You can copy it and paste it into an email if you don't want to go down the road of trying to figure out how to automate it. Even that gets you well ahead of where a lot of other people are. Well, now I'm telling Scrum Masters to
write code.
Yeah, write some code. Write some code, slackers. All right, well.
That was an interesting topic.
It was an interesting topic. I don't think we helped anyone, but I like arguing.
Well, that's good. Arguing is always good.
Yeah, I still don't believe the Scrum Master activities. If you're just relaying information from the team to other people outside the team, you can't even get any of that information. No, that's not true. You can totally get that information. If you have access to Git, or if you have access to Jenkins, or if you have access to VSTS and you can go investigate the logs and stuff like that, you can totally get that information yourself.
Yeah.
But if you technically don't know how to do that, you're basically relaying information. And that's cool. Like if your team is heads down trying to figure out why something failed,
right,
and you're trying to keep them, you're trying to shelter them, like if we're approaching the topic from that perspective, you're trying to let them work through the problem, and you're trying to just manage all the stakeholders over here and keep them off the back of your team. I'm 100% on board. I'm 100% on board.
That's what I was saying, right?
Great. Yeah.
So you're really shielding the team at that point.
Yeah, but,
so from that standpoint, it's okay to do that.
But if you have a company policy that says the Scrum Master is going to be in the middle of all your scheduled deployments, and the Scrum Master is going to be at all your pajama parties, and the Scrum Master is going to send out an email that says we're beginning the deployment, and the Scrum Master is going to send out an email that says we're done with the deployment or it failed or whatever, like that is a huge waste of time.
It completely is. But that said, that's what I've seen. It's very prevalent out there. The Scrum Master really is a gopher, a general secretary, basically, of doing stuff like, this mundane stuff is what they do.
Yeah, that's a waste of time.
I've had this debate with other Scrum Masters. You really don't even need to go to college for this.
No, well, it's unnecessary. I don't think you need. So in that instance where everything is kind of automatic, and I probably would rail against even harder. If you don't have CI/CD pipelines and all your deployments are manual, I would probably even argue harder that says the Scrum Master definitely has nothing to do at that point. You need a developer sending out your status update at that point to say, I'm beginning the manual deployment.
Right.
I'm taking down your site. Now we're not live anymore. I got to stop the database, where I'm stopping traffic from outside or whatever. Because what's the Scrum Master going to do? They can't actually do any of that stuff. They're on a call, relaying to the business.
Adding a delay, actually.
Well, yeah, they're adding a delay. Yeah, absolutely. And they're a point of failure. They have no helpful role in relaying that information back and forth at that point. It's better the developer just do it themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
Well, I think I'm done being combative for one day. I've enjoyed it, and it's kind of tiring.
Oh, maybe the viewers and listeners can let us know what they think.
Oh, let us know what you think about my combativeness. No, I don't need any opinions on my combativeness.
Not on that necessarily, but what do you think about the role of a Scrum Master?
The role of Scrum Master in deployments, either automated or not automated.
Right.
We probably could talk more about manual pajama party deployments and the Scrum Master's role in there, because again, I go back to Scrum Master has no role in those. Even less of a role than in the automated deployments. At least in the automated, if one fails and you don't have automation that covers the failure case, then the Scrum Master can come in the morning and say, oh, automated deployment failed.
Right.
Ooh, I gotta, let me jump on this ahead of everyone in order to help, grease the wheels and move things along. But the manual deployments, even less. I think they're even
flying
less.
Blind, basically,
Yeah, especially in larger companies where they don't have access to things.
Right.
Where access control is a big thing. They just won't have access to anything. They won't be able to see anything, report anything. They'll just be taking people at their word.
They've got to talk to a technical person at the end of the day, right?
Again, no reason for that. Just
right.
let the technical person pass it along.
As long as the company culture is technical people are, encouraged to speak up.
Yeah. All right, well, this has been a fun topic.
It was good.
All right, we need more topics where I just argue by saying the same thing over and over again, and then you try to make points.
Yeah, let's do that. So, the audience should let us know about such topics so we can have a nice backlog of those. We'll burn through them.
Agile Podcast questions.
Yeah. Agile Podcast questions. There you go.
That's right.
Perfect.
Well, I feel like I got all that out of my system.